Hi, in this video I'm going to be talking about how to do parts 1 and part 2 of your lab for intermediate. So part 1 is just filling out this chart. First coming up with the functions that you want your slip to have, choosing the ingredients based on the chart that's on your lab assignment, and then listing your ingredients that you're choosing to include, listing the amount of those, and then how all of those ingredients function, and ensuring that your recipe adds up to 100, because when we do testing we want to make sure that we're always comparing apples to apples, and so the only way to do that is to know that every percentages is based on a whole of 100%, which also conveniently translates into a very nice amount for a glaze test, which is 100 grams. So I've chosen to make a low fire vitreous engobe, or at least attempt to make one. I'm just testing it right now. So I have EPK, which is a white clay, OM4 ball clay, Glomax or Kalin, which is a pre-shrunk kaolin white clay, so it's gonna lower shrinkage, so hopefully I can use my slip at multiple stages in the dryness from wet to bisqueware. Frit 3124, which is my low fire flux. Talc, another low fire flux. Flint, which in a glaze is of course the glass former, but in a slip or a clay functions as a filler to lower shrinkage. It also gives more flint or more glass for your glaze that you might be putting on top of it to bond with. Borax will make my finished slip hard and durable. And then that's considered the base glaze. And on top of that, I'm asking everyone to put 3% cobalt carbonate in their slip just so they can see how it responds to color. And then over here, I'm just asking you to write out how the material you're adding is functioning in the slip. So we have cobalt carbonate, it's going to make it blue. Talc, functioning as a flux. Glomax Kalin, it's a clay, but it's pre-shrunk, so it's going to also lower shrinkage. Those are the details that I expect to see in this far right column. Okay, so before I get started, I want to make sure I put on my N95 mask. That it's not considered acceptable to use your cloth mask for this, because you don't want to be breathing the toxic particles, primarily silica, that are in a lot of these ingredients. So you want to have your N95 mask on, and you want to turn on the ventilation, the tabletop ventilation, which you can see over here. I'm not going to turn it on today just because I don't want to obscure my voice in the video, but because it is a little bit loud. But I'll be really careful not to stir up any dust. So you can choose to use one of our triple beam scales like this for your glaze test or slip test, or you can choose to use a digital scale, which you have to check out from your teacher or a lab assistant. So I'm going to use the digital scale today. So first thing I want to do is turn it on, plug it in, make sure that it's set to grams, and then put a container on there and push the on and button that also has a T on it, and that is going to tare it so that my bowl doesn't inhibit the weight of my materials. Now, I've already put in the first two ingredients, the EPK and the OM4, so my next ingredient is the Glomax or Kalin, which I forgot to get out, so I'm going to be climbing up on a stool to find it. course, it was in the last possible place, but here it is, calcined Kalin. My first two ingredients, which were EPK and OM4, were found easily below the countertop in our large bins, but this one is not as commonly used, so it resides up on the shelves above the counter. So Glow Max, I need 20% or 20 grams. I'm going to take it out of my bowl and dump it over here into my bowl where I'm adding each ingredient to after I've weighed it. All right, so put that aside. My next ingredients is Frit 3124, and I need 20 grams or 20% of that. So Frit 3124 is also something that resides in a large bin because we use it very frequently. So it's right below where I'm working, really convenient. Okay, got my 20 grams of that, dumping it over here. Next thing is talc. I've already taken that down, thankfully. It's right here. It's considered a primary flux, so it has the yellow label. And I need 15 grams of this. All right, that was easy. Next ingredient is flint. I need 20 grams of that, and it also resides right below where I'm working. Very easy to find. Woo, except for and last ingredient of the base glaze is borax. Borax is a funny material because it absorbs humidity, and so it's very chunky. So it's definitely, I mean, all materials should be sieved, but this is one of the ones that when you look at it and you're like, oh right, I better sieve it. It's also very large particled, so it can be sometimes a little bit difficult to put in a sieve, or through a sieve, I mean. All right, so my last ingredient, the one that I want to be most exact with the measurements, is cobalt. Over here, you can't quite see the cabinet, but this is where we keep all of our, well, let me lift this up a little so you can see it. Over here is where we keep all of our oxides and carbonates, and in here I'm looking for cobalt, of course. It's hiding in the back. It's right here. So if you're looking for a Mason stain for your slip testing, this cabinet all has oxides and carbonites, things that are mined directly from the earth. And then over here, just out of the camera's view, is the cabinet that has all the manufactured colorants that we call mostly our Mason stains. And so they're right over there above the left sink in the room. All right, so 5 grams of cobalt. Amazingly, the stuff of which is going to end up very blue, or not 5 grams, 3 grams. It actually comes out this pink color before it's fired. Okay, just a tiny bit more. This is a lot of cobalt. I mean, in a glaze, I would say that was excessive, but in a slip, they need a little bit more colors to get really saturated. Then I consider that an okay amount of colorant for a slip or a vitreous ongo. All right, so my next step is to add water. I'm actually gonna first add the water to the bowl that I put the cobalt in to make sure that I'm not leaving any behind, because it's gonna affect how, if I have an inexact amount of cobalt, then I'm just gonna have a an exact sense of how that Cobalt is responding and giving me color. So now I've added some water. You know, people always ask, well, how much water? And unfortunately, like, every ingredient absorbs water differently, so there's no one answer to that. So my best answer to you is just to say, start with 2 tablespoons. If it's too thick, then add more in 1 tablespoon increments. So stirring it all up. The last thing, which is a very important step, is to sieve it. Tina, one of our former studio assistants, taught me this really awesome trick, which I'm going to teach you. You usually have to sieve ingredient glazes and slips twice to get them really, really smooth. So I'm going to layer a larger mesh sieve, which is this 40, on top of a smaller mesh, which is 80 mesh, inside each other. And so instead of it like doing this twice, you just kind of start it with one and it goes directly in the other. If I'm lucky, I can just sort of pour this through. I do have a lot of chunks at the bottom though, so I'm going to have to get either a spatula or what I actually tend, don't ask me why, but I find it really nice to use a brush, especially when I'm using a very small sieve like this one. Obviously, these are not the sieves you would use if you were mixing a larger batch of glaze. We have much bigger ones in the studio as well. So, just gonna slowly push that material through, and I immediately see that, oh yeah, I'm gonna lose a little bit of the borax because it's just so, such chunky, large particle that it doesn't want to go through, even the larger of the 2 sieves. But I did get a bunch through. I don't know if you can kind of see that, all that stuff piled up in there. It's very important that you make sure you brush the bottom of your sieve so that you don't lose that material. And here I am, ready to apply my engobe to my test tile. So I have here a leather hard or damp test tile. It's about 3 inches by 3 inches. I think I might have put a little too much water in my slip, so I'm gonna put 1 layer on, put it down flat to allow that to dry a little, and I'm gonna go get a bisqueware tile. So this tile was designed, it already is designed for glaze because it already has like half white slip on it and half the bare red clay. But I'm going to use it for my vitreous engobe and add a layer. It's drying faster on here because of course this is nice and dry and porous. And my piece that has the vitreous engobe on the leather hard clay is still a little bit runny. So the last thing I need to do is label my tile. So with the, if you have damp or leather hard tiles, all you really need to do is get a ballpoint pen or your pin tool and carve in the back of it what the material is, how you're going to label it. I don't have that option with the bisqueware tile because I can't carve into it. So first of all, I'm wiping off a little excess engobe from the back side. And now I have a relatively fine brush, and it's been dipped in the red iron oxide wash from the place where we keep our washes. So I'm going to just call this, there's a lot of different things. I mean, often I prefer to only label minimally when I'm first putting a tile in the kiln, and then when it comes out, I will label it with like a Sharpie so I can put more detail on there. So like one thing I could do is just call this 1 TJ. And then in my notes in my lab book, I'll know that 1 TJ is my low fire vitreous engobe with cobalt in it. So that's my preferred route. I mean, or I could label every ingredient on here, and it would be hard to paint. I do put every ingredient on my tiles after they're fired, because there's nothing worse than having a test tile that you really love and you want to repeat it, but you can't find your notes. So even if I just label it 1 now, after the firing, I will go back and meticulously label everything that's in there and the temperature. So okay, this is doesn't look very exciting right now. I'm going to actually put another layer of slip on one side to see how it does if the engobe goes on a little bit thicker, and how it goes on so basically I have more information. I have the information that it's like 1 layer and the information that it's 2 layers. All right, my other tile, this one's, like I said, it's going to be really easy to label once I'm done applying my engobe because it's wet. So I'll just carve the label in the back with my pin tool. Can't do it right now because it's still drying, but I will. So make sure you look for these tiles in the classroom so you can see the results of my test. And I think that's it for now. Next video will be all about making a line blend.